Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Uncommon Comedy Podcast. We are available to view on or listen to on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and on Spotify. Search Uncommon Comedy Podcast, and you can watch us on Facebook and YouTube. On Facebook at Uncommon Comedy, on Instagram at Uncommon Comedy Tour, and YouTube Uncommon Comedy Podcast. I'm excited for today's guest because he is a world-renowned ventriloquist, and anyone who knows me knows that there's two things in life that turned me into an 8-year-old kid. One is the Harlem Globetrotters. The other is a ventriloquist. So I don't want to waste any more time. Let's bring him in, Mr. David Pendleton. David, how are you today, sir?
How are you?
I am well. My first question is, can you dribble a basketball? How good are you?
No, I cannot. I'm
okay.
Horrible at basketball.
so we'll skip out the Harlem Globetrotters and we'll stick with the ventriloquist. So one of the things that I was watching a lot of your act. One of the things that I really love is the skill involved in what you do and the ability to manipulate. I'm very big into voices. The ability to manipulate voices and characters and switch on a dime, and all while maintaining such a straight face without the lip movement, and it's your technique is really, really good, and I just enjoy seeing that kind of high level execution of such a skill that most people don't realize how hard that is to pull off. And so I just tip my hat to you that you're an incredible performer.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Right back at you, Brian. I'm just amazed at your ability to do impressions and celebrity voices and the various characters that you pull off. That is a whole other skill level that I frankly have never been good at. But I love how well you do the characters that you do.
Well, thank you. Isn't that always interesting, though? There's always one sort of skill.
Right.
Like, you're never like, you could be really good at one skill and you're like, man, but I can't do that.
Yeah.
And, it's like, I can do voices, but, I can't sing, or I can't do ventriloquism, or I can't, there's so many things. And you just, for some reason, you go, man, if I could only do that, it would be so much better. So,
well, I've often said to people, yep, I'm pretty much a one-trick pony. I pretty much have my thing. And, being in this pandemic corona situation has really just reminded me that, as I thought about, oh my goodness, what if the new normal is radical such that I find myself not being able to get back to work on stage performing? Mm-hmm. What on earth am I going to do?
Right.
And that totally intimidates me, because I just feel like, okay, this is what I do. I don't know I'm too old to start something new.
So. I totally feel you on that. But have you thought about like kind of what you do? Because that's something that a couple of comics and I have been talking about. Like, what is this new normal going to be like? And I think this medium is going to be kind of part of that. Have you looked into any of this?
Of course. And, I watch podcasts and different things. And there's a lot of stuff out there where people are just, they're bored. So they start their own podcast and they throw it out there. And so, there's a lot of noise, frankly, that exists out there. And
which we are adding to at this very moment. So.
I know, but you want to do things with excellence, and you want it to be interesting, and you want to be able to hold people's attention, but not just for the sake of holding their attention. You want to actually offer something that people will value and and enjoy. That it will have a sense of meaning, to
right.
it. So I appreciate that. That's what you're trying to do. The whole idea of the Uncommon Comedy Podcast and the Uncommon Comedy Tour is all about creating content that everybody can enjoy. You're not wanting to, of course, get into the gutter with what is so prevalent in comedy, especially in clubs, and it seems like it's everywhere. It's ubiquitous that people are doing comedy that they say, "Well, I'm just being real," and it's like, yeah, but do you really have to go there?
Right.
And so I appreciate the fact that you're wanting to provide content that is for a broad audience. But what I like to do, and what I feel like is my audience as a performer on stage, is the whole family. Like I feel like that I am really in my element when I look out into the audience and I see grandma and grandpa and mom and dad and kids and grandkids all sitting and watching the show together. And of course, I try to offer something that will be entertaining to everybody, which is a challenge. And it's certainly something that you don't see in the comedy world. They're pretty much shooting at the very adult audience.
Right.
And I think it's a much bigger challenge to try to create content that the whole family can enjoy together. But frankly, that's what I look for. Someday, I don't have grandkids yet. I'm not like John Branyan, our friend John Branyan, who already has like a whole passel of grandkids. I have 2 sons, neither of which are married yet. But one day I would love to be able to sit down with the whole family, including the grandkids, and watch entertaining stuff together. But that's hard to find.
Right. And I was actually, I had Leland Clausen on the podcast, a very funny comedian. And that was my comment to him was his act works, whether, it works, and he's not playing down to like 8-year-olds or anything like that.
Exactly.
He's just doing his act, but it works on so many different levels. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with the Uncommon Comedy, and while kids may not necessarily understand certain things we talk about.
Right.
I do voices. I'm big and goofy on stage, and they like that. So, I mean, we try to have a level that, at least you're comfortable, that you can bring them, and you're not going to have any weird conversations afterwards.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And then I like that we also try to touch in on charity as well. It's a really big thing for us to try to encourage too. So, but as far as the, going with the future, have you thought about maybe doing a ventriloquist like podcast? There's one for like voice actors. That's a really popular one where they get all these voice actors on and they talk about the craft and they talk about the industry. And that might be something,
I mean, it intimidates me. I'll just be quite honest with you. It really intimidates me to think about starting something like that because, number one, I would want to put it out there and have it be something that is valuable, that people would really be interested in watching and listening to, and that would actually have real value to it. And so that just feels like a tall order to me. And I suppose, like so many performers, I'm a bit of a perfectionist to the point that it immobilizes me.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the problem with perfectionism, is that you're never going to get there.
Right.
So then you're defeated before you even get started. So anyway, yeah, I've certainly thought about it. And frankly, being involved in podcasts like yours just pushes me along.
Nice. Well, I'm glad that there's a lot of interesting tools. We can talk about it after the show that maybe make it a little easier to do. But I think that would be a great podcast. I know I'd certainly listen, but but I'm a bit biased. So
sure. Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about you and your career. So how did what inspired you to start performing?
Okay. I started learning ventriloquism when I was 6 years old.
Wow.
I got a little Charlie McCarthy doll from my grandparents, but they didn't come up with the idea. I really wanted that. And the reason I wanted it was because as a kid, I was captivated by puppets of all sorts on, all the television shows that had puppets on it, totally captivated me. So Captain Kangaroo, had Mr. Moose and the rabbit and, these different puppets. And certainly there were the Muppets and Sesame Street out there. And so I was at a friend's house. He had one of those ventriloquist what people call ventriloquist dummies with the slot jaw mouth. And I was captivated by that and really wanted one. And so it was my grandparents that got me that. But then they also got me a record called Instant Ventriloquism by Jimmy Nelson.
Mm-hmm.
And back in the 50s and 60s, Jimmy Nelson was on television and most notable doing commercials for Nestle's. And he had two characters in his act, Danny O'Day and Farfel the dog. And Danny O'Day in these Nestle's commercials would sing, N-E-S-T-L-E-S, Nestle's makes the very best. And then Farfel would say, chocolate. And so that's his claim to fame. And he made a record, an actual LP record album, put it out there. And all the ventriloquists that I know of in my era, that are kind of my contemporaries, we all learned off that same record album. He spawned a whole new generation of ventriloquists. This includes guys like Jeff Dunham and Terry Fader.
Mm-hmm.
We all learned off that same record album.
Oh, that's funny. So from 6 years old, you started practicing. Do you remember your first show?
Yeah, I did a talent show. The record album came with a script, and I memorized the script verbatim. And I did a little 6-minute bit when I was 8 years old in a talent show for the Cub Scouts. And I remember being on stage, and the MC was out in front of the curtain to introduce me. And then they opened the curtain, and I was on stage with my little Charlie McCarthy doll. And I just remember thinking that was so cool. Like the curtain opened and there was the audience and there I was. And that just captured me. And so I did my little, routine, which was nothing original at all about it. But, that's how I got started. And then I started developing new material. And I remember it was my grandmother that worked with me and coming up with jokes, and, silly little songs and that sort of thing as an 8, 9, 10-year-old.
Wow. That's so cool. That's so cool to be writing material. I mean, yeah, at that age, it's pretty impressive.
I'm not saying that it was good material.
No, but at least to have the, the ability to come up with something original, and to expand it to even know, and that you weren't just reciting the same pattern. Do you call it pattern, or is it just?
Yeah, I suppose it's or routine.
Routine. Yeah, just kind of blending in with the magician world there for a second there. Yeah.
Oh, they're what they do.
They get very upset if you don't call it patter. So I know far too many magicians.
Yeah. So magicians and ventriloquists are kind of like second cousins. There's a lot of crossover, because I learned magic when I was a kid too. Like I was captivated by that. And it does seem very common that ventriloquists and magicians had that similar interest. And I think it makes sense too, because as a ventriloquist, you are creating magic. You're wanting to convince the audience that this character that you're talking to is real. And there's magic that you're creating when you do that. Actually, David Copperfield wanted to become a ventriloquist.
Huh.
A very fun story. I had the opportunity to sit down and have dinner. It's going to sound like I'm name dropping, because I am name dropping. But actually, David Copperfield had a mentor that was also my mentor. This guy's name's Andre Cole, mentored Copperfield long before he met me. But then I came along and actually was in a mentor relationship with Andre Cole. So I was in Las Vegas. Andre and his wife, Kathy, and my wife and I were spending some time together in Las Vegas. And we went and saw David Copperfield's show. And then Copperfield, of course, who is very close with Andre Cole, said, well, let's all go to dinner. So we all got to go to dinner. And it was really interesting. I thought I'd just be listening in on this conversation between Andre and David Copperfield, but he had a lot of questions for me. And he told me that he wanted to be a ventriloquist, but he just was no good at it. And so I looked at him and I said, so I guess I'm kind of living your dream. Thankfully, he laughed at that.
Yeah.
Of course, the man is a bazillionaire.
Yes.
But yeah, it is common that ventriloquists kind of dabble in magic and vice versa. Magicians will often dabble in ventriloquism. As a matter of fact, David Copperfield has a little character in his show. It's a little alien character, recorded voice, but it's this animatronic character that he uses in his show, which is kind of like, a ventriloquist routine.
Oh, that's funny.
So, yeah.
That's funny. So now ventriloquism seems like such a difficult skill to really get down. How long did it take practicing before, and how much were you practicing before it started to like click for you?
I think since I started when I was young, it's not like it was this profound effort for me. I will be honest with you, it came to me somewhat naturally. And only now, looking back, do I think, yeah, that was God's grace.
Yeah,
that was a gift. And I'm guessing the same is probably true of you, Brian, that for you, doing impressions probably was just something that you started messing around with, and it just happened naturally for you. Am I right?
Yeah, it was weird. I was in high school, and I was around Dane Cook was in I went to the same school as Dane Cook for a while.
Okay.
And he was Dane Cook even then, and everyone was like messing around and doing voices, and I wanted to be part of the group.
Yeah.
And I could do this like really terrible like baby Kermit the Frog from the Muppet Babies and this really bad Inspector Gadget. And then after that, I just started not hearing voices, but understanding how voices work.
Yeah.
There's a difference. Yeah. And so then that's when it started to kind of click in for me. And that's when I learned that I had this gift of being able to hear things. That was my blessing. So I just started to work.
And maybe you have done some fill-in work, but I've often thought, for some of these voices, like, who does Homer Simpson? Who's the voice?
Dan Castellaneta.
Okay. Yeah. I knew that. I just couldn't call it up.
Yeah.
Like if he got laryngitis or something, I've often thought, good grief, they could call you and you could fill in and people wouldn't even know. Have you ever done that kind of work, like film work? Like
I've offered.
You have.
They make $300,000 an episode.
Yeah, no kidding.
But there was actually a period of time when Harry Shearer was leaving the show and The Simpsons, and they were like, so I put out a video and doing these voices, and they basically were like, hey, Morgan Spurlock retweeted it to the exec saying, hey, looks like we found our guy for the On Deck Circle and all that. And so it was kind of a fun little few months there of, maybe something will happen. But he ended up returning, and
I see.
Yeah, because they said we're not bringing anyone in for to audition because our first goal is to get him to come back. And so there was like a 4-month window of just sitting around waiting and hoping that he would stay out, and so he didn't. But I've also reached out to I think Universal to do like some Snape stuff for the Harry Potter, but I haven't heard back from them. But I should follow up.
No kidding. Yeah. See, I just feel like that you would be a shoo-in for that kind of thing, because what you do is very unique and you are very good at it.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. So
you know who the voice of Tigger was? The original Tigger?
I should know this.
Well, the voice was Paul Winchell.
Okay.
And so Paul Winchell was a celebrated and very successful ventriloquist. And his main character was Jerry Mahoney. And he also had Knucklehead Smith, who was kind of the dopey, for Jerry Mahoney. And brilliant ventriloquist, amazing skill. But he was tapped to do the voice of Tigger. And if you watch, YouTube clips of Paul Winchell and Jerry Mahoney, you totally hear Tigger.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
There he is. But of course, Tigger was its own unique character. It's not like, it was totally like Jerry Mahoney is Tigger.
Right.
You can hear the timbre and
Mhm.
the nuances in the voice.
Oh, that's funny.
So yeah, there's a voice actor connection with ventriloquism right there in terms of a very successful character that was created for Disney in Tigger.
Wow.
But I thought of that because, of course, when Paul Winchell passed away, now who's going to be Tigger? And
Right.
whoever it is needs to be able to do Paul Winchell's Tigger. You need to be able to imitate
Right.
that voice and to do it well, because that's the voice we expect.
Right.
Character.
Although I've seen it a lot just from being interested in this world, that the voice definitely evolves, even for someone as famous as Kermit the Frog, from Jim Henson down to Brian Henson.
Yes.
Because it's so hard to match.
Exactly.
And same with Winnie the Pooh's change, Tigger's change, Marvin the Martian, like especially when Mel Blanc passed away. There's so many characters have to change, but
you have to keep the essence, and
yes.
and that, of course, is, I'm sure, what you have to focus on as a vocal impressionist, is that you are capturing the essence. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but you have to get the essence, the main thrust of who this character is.
Well, as you said before, that perfectionist, no, it's going to be absolutely, I always strive for that, but at some point you have to go, that's good enough. People know.
Yeah, except in your case, I feel like you do, get just doggone near perfect in terms of the, what you accomplish. But I know that, for vocal impressionists, remember, the big classic that was everybody knew, in my era growing up, was Rich Little.
Mm-hmm.
And, some of the voices that he did, they weren't spot on, but he captured the essence of that character or of that celebrity and their personality. And so, it was like, yeah, there he is. You captured it.
Well, right. And here's what's interesting with regard to that is sometimes an impression will become standardized. So if you look at, for example, Dana Carvey,
okay,
and you look at his George Bush or whatever, that's exaggerated, and it's not. If you're to listen, you go, that's not George Bush, but you get the hair and you get the, whatever, and you get, again, the mannerisms, the essence of him, and then that becomes the accepted norm of what that impression is. And so then people start doing that impression. They do an impression of Dana Carvey's impression.
Yeah, you're right. That's interesting.
Yeah, and it was like that with Bill Cosby, and it's like that. We started doing Eddie Murphy's impression of Bill Cosby, and where if you sit and actually listen, you go, that's not quite right, but it's just
like I love to watch Jimmy Fallon do Jerry Seinfeld.
Right.
He just captures, his delivery so well. But of course, that's clearly Jimmy Fallon doing Jerry Seinfeld, when you hear it.
Well, it's also easier to learn an impression watching someone else do an impression.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Makes sense. You see the things that they focus in on, the little details that they go, oh, okay, like for Trump, it's, the hands or whatever, it's the lips or whatever, whoever the case, the impression is. And you say, oh, they're really emphasizing that. So that's standing out. And so then you just kind of zone in on that and go, well, I can do that. And then you start putting the puzzle together with the face, the expressions, the voice, and the hand movement. And you go, okay, so that's a little lesson for people who want to know about some voice stuff.
Do you feel like that you have like what you would consider to be your signature impression? Like this is my favorite to do. This is what I'm most requested to do. This is kind of my signature.
I would say Homer, and then it's probably the signature.
Yeah.
Homer Simpson, and then
I would guess, but I didn't want to suggest that. I figured that would you were going.
Well, I spent like 10 years trying to get it.
Huh.
I was like really close for 10 years, just sitting there. I'm like, oh, I'm so close. And then I saw him do it in person. and I got to see the way his mouth moved. And I was like, oh, I have you now. And now I know what you're all about, mister. Like, because it changes, as you know, or when you watch James Earl Jones speak, he pulls his mouth back on certain words. And as you know, the shape of the mouth and the muscles and the tongue and all of that change it all changes the sound and everything. So, and it also helps the face kind of, you start to you take over that person's essence and just kind of comes through you. A little harder for me now with the facial paralysis to get some of that. So that's why, I stick with cartoons. It's a lot easier. But yeah, so the Homer was, much more of that. And then Snape, I just kind of was messing around one day, Alan Rickman, and I was doing Dr. Evil from Austin Powers movies. And, the $1 million, and I just started to like mess with that. And I was like, it kind of has the same cadence. And so if you take Dr. Evil and turn it down and turn it down and turn it down, you are left with Alan Rickman. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. All I want are some sharks with frickin' lasers. But my cycloptic friend says that's not possible. It's just so it's basically it's Dr. Evil just brought down.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
And then you learn the same things with when a voice actor does multiple voices. So like Jim Henson was Ernie and he was Kermit the Frog, and those are both very similar. So like you start to go, oh, and so you can build out your repertoire pretty quickly by just changing little aspects of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, enough about me. This is not about.
It fascinates me. Oh, it totally fascinates me. And like I said, I've never really gone for it in terms of, it's not been a passion of mine. People ask me a lot, oh, do you do vocal impressions? I bet you're really good at that or whatever, because I do character voices and, but the answer is no, I don't. I can talk without moving my lips, but I wouldn't say that I'm a vocal impressionist at all.
Yeah, and I've started to really deep dive into it during this pandemic. So finding out, how to move the larynx, up or down, and what does that do to the voice, and how to, dealing with the soft palate and dealing with, the your vocal cords and how to tighten them and how to, like I know how to do them instinctively.
Yes, as most of us do.
Right,
most of us are not thinking about.
But even regards to even with regards to voices, you go, okay, it's kind of this is more nasally, so let me do a little more nasal. So you have those things, but then to sit there and like try to break it down and go, okay, so if I do this, it's this movement, and if I can do this on command, it'll change this to my voice, and then I'll be able to. Because I've been trying to do a Gilbert Gottfried impression forever, and
everybody does Gilbert.
I know, but it's such a good voice to do.
It is. Yeah. So, okay, lay it on me.
It's terrible. It's not ready yet. So,
okay, fair enough. I get it.
It's not even close, but I'm just saying, like, that's the one, that's the two that I've been dying to do that I can't do is Gilbert Gottfried and Gollum from Lord of the Rings.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So, because if I could do those, I would just talk like that all the time. And I think my wife is very lucky and she's very fortunate that, and she's very happy that I can't do those because that would drive her insane, I'm sure.
Doesn't Jim Fallon, when he does Gilbert Gottfried, doesn't he always cover one eye or something?
I think so. Yeah. It's to do that like squint.
Yeah.
Because he's always squinting and
always squinting. Yeah.
Yeah, I try to do it, but you have to do it in a way that doesn't just ravage your vocal cords.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, there's a couple characters that I use in my act which utilize that more pinched voice or that that gravelly, and I find that I just have to be careful that I can't overdo it, even in my act, because my voice will just be toast
right
by the end of the night. And if I'm called on to do 2 shows in an evening, I'm done. So.
Yeah, exactly. And especially if you're in the middle of, doing a week of performances or back-to-back shows over the course of a couple of nights.
That's right.
You have to really take care of that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And guys like, well, I just said his name. For heaven's sake.
Jimmy Fallon?
No, well, yeah, that's the one that's coming to my head right now, but that's not who I'm thinking of. One America's Got Talent, working in Vegas.
Oh,
Terry Fader. Terry
yes.
Fader. Good grief. Why did that fall out of my head? Terry Fader, the guys like that who are literally 1 or 2 shows a night in Vegas. Like, that's insane.
6 nights a week,
6 nights, yes. So
how do you was it for you getting into all of this and growing up through it, like go through your teen years and
right, yeah. So people come up to me and they'll say, "Oh, I've always wanted to do what you do," and my response to them is, "I can't relate to you at all because." And here's what I mean by that: I haven't always wanted to do what I do. I've always just done what I do. You know what I mean? In other words, I just got started early enough that I was too naive or just uninformed to know that I couldn't do it, or to think that I couldn't do it. And so I just started it slowly, and it just evolved over time. And then I discovered, oh wow, look, I can do this. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I did my first show when I was 8, and then I started to develop an act, and then I was doing birthday parties. But you have to remember, I'm 9, 10 years old. I'm just a kid with puppets. And so it's a novelty. I'm this redheaded kid in the small town, and let's hire him to come do and pay him $20 to come do a little 15-minute show at the birthday party. And I'm thinking, this is really fun. And I'm taking it quite seriously even at that age. Like, I would get dressed. I was concerned about my wardrobe and, all of that presentation. But then when I got to high school, I really got serious about it, or at least, more serious.
Mm-hmm.
And it was fun because at our high school, we always had a talent show every year, the big annual talent show in the high school. And I, started my freshman year and discovered that I could do insult humor, because a ventriloquist can totally get away with, insulting, the various teachers and administrators, because I didn't say that. It was the puppet that said it. And it's also kind of part and parcel with what happens with ventriloquism. The whole idea is that, this character is out of your control and saying, quote unquote, inappropriate things, or it's, being inappropriately insulting. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
And a lot of it, the humor that you do is that the puppet actually insults the ventriloquist. And of course, that's funny because I'm literally insulting myself when I do that. That's what makes you laugh, though, because you're realizing that, okay, that's just funny, that here's this puppet that's giving him a hard time, and I'm starting to believe that puppet's really giving him a hard time.
Right.
So in high school, then that was always a very popular addition. People, by my senior year, people were totally looking forward to, I can hardly wait to see what Pendleton is going to pull out this year as he roasts the various teachers and personalities in the school. So I started to learn about things like that, things like roasts. And, this was back in the day when there were the celebrity roasts that were on television. And that's when the roasts were well done. They were, done in good taste, and it was acceptable by everyone.
Right.
What I recently saw something on Comedy Central that was a celebrity roast, and I was frankly appalled. I don't know if you've seen any recent celebrity roast. Oh my goodness. Like, it's just crossed the line into downright mean.
Right.
And there's a difference. And I realize that sometimes it's hard for people to find that line. Interestingly enough, I recently did a show for a group of college students. And some of the feedback that I got was that they thought that the little guy on my knee was a little bit of a bully.
That sounds about right for colleges.
Yeah, and people talk about, the snowflake generation.
Yeah.
And I was rather taken aback by that, because it was like, well, no, that's kind of that's kind of the point in ventriloquism, is that
Right.
the character is supposed to be a little bit playful in regard to that. But I understand too that, you know, there's a it's a it's a balancing act. You
Right.
have to figure out, okay, where do you cross the line, or where is that line? But okay, what was the original question? Totally got off.
We were just talking about how you were progressing through and having it become a little more serious for you.
Yeah. And so basically, when I got to college, I landed a job at Kings Island in Cincinnati, which is a theme park in the Midwest, and doing shows. And I did a little 15-minute show every hour, 6 days a week. And as far as I was concerned, I was living the dream at that point. But it was also at that time that I started to develop my chops and to think more carefully about crafting an act and what works and what doesn't work, and what's going to hit a home run every time. And when you are literally able to do 6 shows a day, 6 days a week,
wow,
you can work on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it wasn't killing me because it was just 15 or 20 minutes. So it's not like I was doing 6 full acts.
Right.
I was just doing, and I was doing a lot, the same material over and over, which meant that I had it completely down cold, and I learned the value of that. When you have an act, if it's down cold where you can literally do it in your sleep, then that's when you can start honing and tweaking all the little subtle nuances in presentation.
Right. Absolutely. Now, I was going to ask you about this a little bit later, but we're on it now. So one of those things is as you said, is kind of insult humor, but or crowd work, as comics know it.
Yeah.
What are some of the tips for or keys to good crowd work?
Oh, wow. I always have audience participation in my show. It keeps people's, it kind of has people on their edge a little bit, on the edge of their seat, like, oh, he might choose me. Magicians do this too all the time. But the key is of course to be respectful, to be polite, but to know where the line is in terms of what is going to cross over and might be perceived as being mean or unkind. So I don't know how else to answer that question.
Yeah, well, I mean, you also have a little bit of leeway because, like you said, of the voices. I have a friend of mine from South Africa, and he can be as mean and as cruel, but because of that accent, it's hysterical. But if I were to say it, they'd be like, "You're a jerk." But he gets away. So I think it's probably like that too with the.
It's totally like that. Yeah, the characters can totally get away with stuff that I could never get away with, as if I was doing a stand-up comedy act, or I was just doing, I was just by myself. There's absolutely no way. Now,
it doesn't seem like there'd be a lot of mentors out there, but what was the for that, at least during the pre-internet? What was the best advice you ever received about comedy or performing?
Well, I started to attend a ventriloquist convention when I was 13 years old. And so I started to learn a lot of the elements of ventriloquism and building a ventriloquist act through watching and attending, of course, workshops and plenary sessions, that sort of thing at the ventriloquist convention. And by the way, okay, I started going when I was 13. There was also another young man there that was in his teens. He was a couple years older than me. He's 15 years old at the time. A guy by the name of Jeff Dunham, also attending this ventriloquist convention. So there's always been a pretty tight community of ventriloquists, which has really been a fun community thing to feel like, yeah, I pretty much know or have met or have some interaction with just about every ventriloquist that's out there, certainly the ones that attend the convention. So there's something about that community that is just really special. But that departs a little bit from your question. Your question had more to do with, what did your question have more to do with? Writing material.
Your best advice about comedy or performing, or ventriloquism.
Yeah. So I would say the most practical, best advice, and I'm guessing that probably every comic that you ask this question says the same thing. Record yourself and then watch the recording. It's one thing to just record it. It's another thing to actually have to watch the recording. And that is painful to do. But I think that has helped me like no other single thing has helped me in terms of honing that craft. And that has to do with even how are you doing in terms of how are the laughs? Because when you're on stage, sometimes you think you're getting, you're doing really well. But when you watch the recording, you realize, oh, yeah, that actually didn't get the response.
Yeah, that didn't work at all.
The recording doesn't lie. And you have to be willing to watch the recording and, painful as it is, recognize that reality is our friend. I have a friend that used to say that all the time. Reality is our friend. And the truth is sometimes hard to face. But when you watch that, you go, okay, so, all right, that's what happened. I thought it was better than that. But I was being a little too optimistic. But I see now what I need to do. And it's a myriad of things, but when you watch yourself, you can figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah. Or you watch yourself do things, you go, oh my gosh, I do that? I didn't even know I did that.
That nervous tick.
Yes, exactly. Why do I do that? That's so annoying. So
I know I always do this. I always go behind my ear for some reason. And I'm like, well, I don't have hair enough to, like, I'm brushing my hair back. Like,
yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah.
Thing.
And it's always at the same point in the same joke. It's a weird.
I mean, sometimes you do that and you watch it, you think, yeah, that actually works.
Yeah. And then sometimes it's just, it doesn't add or deduct anything from the act. And it's just I think originally it was like this subconscious thing to like try to make it look like I was thinking or something. I don't know what. And then it's just,
you're being a little casual or whatever.
Yeah. It's so weird when you record yourself, what you see, and then you go, okay, stop doing that. So stop.
Yeah, because there's all kinds of things that you do that you had no idea that you did.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe me, record yourself doing anything. And you'll watch yourself and you go, oh my goodness, do I really do that? And the answer is, yeah, we're there. It is.
Yeah. And then that's a good way to focus on it. So here's my favorite question I love asking everybody. What is the worst show you've ever had?
And probably like most people, they can call it out just like that. I was invited to do an outreach event at a church in Texas. And the prior year, they had like the power team who had come and done their feats of strength, and of course with loud music, and that's a whole different vibe,
right,
than a ventriloquist act. So right away, I had some explaining to do, that if they were going to compare what they had last year to what they're getting this year, they have to really recognize that these are two very different things. But what they did was set up it was an outdoor event. They set up a flatbed trailer as the stage, and there were holes in that, which I could deal with that, but it was rickety. They set it up with a highway, essentially. Not but there was like a country highway. In other words, that was traveled.
Yep.
Right behind me. And they had me do my show in the evening, just as the sun is going down right there. So I had trucks and it was at an intersection. And so the trucks, of course, using air brakes as they come to the stop sign. and I'm looking out at the audience, and they're all doing this because
covering their eyes. Yep.
Because the sun is right there at the time of my performance, right there in their eyes. It was just really, really bad planning on the part of the organizer. And when I got there, I realized that this was going to be a problem. And what I really wanted to do was say, okay, we need to move this flatbed truck over to the other side so that the sun will be in my eyes, which I'll be fine with that. I'll be well lit. But at least the sun is not in the audience's eyes. And the distraction of the traffic behind me won't be as big a deal. Like I really wanted to just basically undo and redo everything that they had worked so hard to put together. But there's no way I could do that.
Right.
And not only would it make me look prima donna, it was just not practical. So that was just a really, really hard show. And it was just exactly what you would expect. It was just like very little audience response. They had, so counted on this being this great outreach event where there's going to be people coming forward like a Billy Graham crusade.
And they were going backwards. Well, and it's one of those things too. And even if you had switched the trailer and all of that, it's still outdoors,
right?
Which is terrible for comedy.
Yes.
Because the sound just goes straight up and it dissipates, and you as a performer don't hear it. It messes with your rhythm, messes with your timing, and you feel like you're not doing well.
Yes.
The crowd feels like you're not doing well, and whoever's organizing it doesn't hear the big laughter, so they're like, "Oh, this isn't going well." And even though people are enjoying it, it's just not. Outdoors is terrible for comedy.
So this was not only outdoors, but it had all those other elements to add insult to injury, and just compound it. So like, this was definitely the worst show ever.
How long of a set? Do you remember how long of a set you had to do?
They wanted me to do like an hour.
Oh.
And I struggled through and probably got to maybe a 45-minute set. And you start to sense that, okay, we're done.
Yeah.
It's just people with their hands over their eyes, and you can just feel that this was a long enough show. But you feel like such a failure. Like they've done all the expense to get me out there, and and they talked it up real big, and and environment makes all the difference in the world for performers. Particularly comedians, like you say. But then you got a guy like me, who I'm not even like a stand-up comic, where at least if I was a stand-up comic, I could take the microphone and I could do crowd work, as you say. Mm-hmm. I could go down into the audience and talk to people and get interaction and see, how are you doing? And, this sort of thing. But as a ventriloquist doing a ventriloquist act, you don't have that option open to you. It just isn't possible. You get people up on stage with you.
Right.
But you can't go down and work in the crowd, which is that's about the only thing that might have redeemed that. But for me, it wasn't possible. So
from experience, I can tell you that probably wouldn't have redeemed it. It just makes it worse.
Yeah.
You just see the disappointment on their face up close.
Up close and personal. As they're looking at you going, Yeah, no. Don't come
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, we're good. Don't talk to me. I don't want to be a part of this. And that's such a lonely, awful feeling.
Yeah.
Well, and here's the thing, like you said, you don't want to be a prima donna, but you want the show to be set up for success,
Yeah.
know?
For their,
And
not yours, for their sake.
exactly. And that's what I try to say when there's something. It's like a balancing act of like, I want green M&Ms in my, green room or whatever. But when I sit there and they say, hey, would you like to do this? I go, well, if we, change this to this will be a much better experience. If we bring the chairs together instead of seating everyone in the back with a big dance floor, in between us, it'll be a much better experience for me and for the crowd, and it's going to make you look better. And that's because that's always the feel, especially like you said, they spend that expense to bring you out there, to build it up, and you want it to be a successful event for them. And I always say that during the time leading up, how's this going to be laid out or whatever, because I want you to look good.
Yes. Totally.
And they're much more willing to listen when you say that. But sometimes you get there and it's just laid out in this really bizarre manner, and you're like, well, here we go. I got my deposit. I got the check. I'm good.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I'll do it.
I have a writer that shows the very setup that you're describing with the dance floor and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an X, not this. just to help them understand that this is not going to work for what I am doing for you. And then of course I explain, if you have, if you're later in the evening, you're planning to have a dance floor or, a DJ or whatever, well then yes, absolutely work with this, but we're going to have to make some accommodations here. Like you might have to have that set up on the other end of the room, or, figure out a way to make that happen.
Right.
Or maybe you set up all the chairs on the dance floor and you bring everybody in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the best scenario. It requires a little bit more work, but that is going to be a much more entertaining show for everybody.
Absolutely.
And yes, you're going to have to move some chairs around and that sort of thing. That is going to create some issues, but it will be so worth it. And we've all done it. I'm sure you have, performed that empty dance floor.
Oh, yes.
All these people that are way back there. There's no way you can make a connection.
It's never good. Yeah, it's never good. We're talking with David Pendleton, who's a ventriloquist, and you can check out his act and his DVDs at anythingcantalk.com. That's anythingcantalk.com. Yeah, it's so funny how many little things like that just get in the way of a successful show.
Yeah,
and it's like, yeah, just put the chairs on the floor. Like it's easier that way. And for those who are wondering, a rider is basically something, and when you sign your contract, it's an addition of saying these are the terms that these are the things I need in order for the show, for me to do the show. And
big celebrities are kind of notorious for having these ridiculous riders that have all these little fine details, like you say, green M&Ms only, kind of ridiculous stuff. But yeah, you and I, of course, out there working as we are, we want to provide a rider that will be practical,
right?
Also make for a good show. So
right,
really, the rider's not for me as much as it is for you, just to understand, you as the higher, the person.
Absolutely, and it's sound, lights, for the stand, and somewhat reasonable location for let's not be outside if it's going to be over 90 degrees. Let's
exactly. For everyone's sake, because no one wants to sit there in 90-degree heat and watch a show, even if
people are miserable. Yeah, if you want an angry crowd, let's do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I heard some people say the reason that they do like a specific thing like the green M&Ms is to know that they read the rider.
Yeah.
So if they got the green M&Ms right, that means they did the other things needed.
Yeah. Exactly. I've heard that too.
Yeah.
It's like I don't need to play games. I just
I
just talk through with them. And actually, my wife handles. Thankfully, I have a dear wife that is a partner in this, and she handles the booking and the contracts and all that, which is really fantastic. And she's so good at it. She's so good.
Yeah, that's not my realm at all either. I that's the worst part. That's where I say that's where I make my money. Yeah. I perform for free, but it's all the other stuff. That's where you charge the money for.
Well, and sometimes you show up in situations where there's just not a lot of control. Like I have done, interestingly enough, quite a few shows inside of prisons,
mm-hmm.
and it's a situation where they do have a PA system, but they don't have a mic stand because they're used to, somebody stand up there with a microphone and that's all they need. I don't need a mic stand, but I need a mic stand because I have characters.
Right.
And so somebody will say, well, that's all right. I'll just hold it for you. It's like, no, that's not going to work. I've actually had to fabricate a mic stand using duct tape and a mop inside of a prison. And incidentally, I just want to mention, for the sake of the podcast, the prison ministry that I work with is called Behind the Walls. And it is a really, really great ministry, the Behind the Walls prison ministry. And if you go to behindthewalls.com, you can learn more about it. It's a great opportunity to actually, in a very practical way, have an impact in the lives of people who find themselves in that very unfortunate situation. And it seems a little odd that we would be bringing comedy into that situation, but they are desperate for something that will make them laugh and that is entertaining and uplifting. And of course, when I go and do a program there, I'm not only wanting to bring in just, something fun and entertaining, but then we also tie in, an important message.
Mm-hmm.
So, and give people who come in as volunteers also the opportunity to connect with inmates and to have a positive impact on their lives. And the person who's the presenter really is just setting the table so that the volunteers who have come in will have a more natural way of connecting with the people that they've come to encourage. So,
now, how did you get started with that, with the Behind the Walls?
Years ago, I was with a friend who was he handled does basketballs, like spins basketballs, and
mm-hmm.
The Crevier family. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. Bruce Crevier and his family, and then he has a sister named Tanya who's been working with this ministry for years. And he asked me if I'd ever done anything in prison, and of course my initial response was, "Oh yeah, right. This lily white guy from the suburbs with puppets. They're going to eat me alive in prison." But what I found is that the guys in prison are just really wanting to have people come and provide something positive and uplifting for them. And,
yeah, I was gonna say, do puppets go over well in prison?
Well, to my surprise, yes. They do.
Do you find that you're changing any of the insult comedy?
Well, I actually, okay, so this is going to sound like, really? You really do that? And does that work? But one of the characters, I dress in black and white stripes. So he's an inmate. So now he can sort of connect with the guys there. And of course, complain about, the accommodations. While they gave you a cell, they gave me a suitcase. And then, of course, he talks about how he got locked up and how unfair that was, and how he's been treated, unfairly by the law and this sort of thing. And of course, I'm the one that's like, "Oh, come on, no, it wasn't really that bad." And "Oh, yes, it was." So there's that kind of dialogue. And I find that, yeah, at first I was concerned. I was thinking, well, these guys are going to think that I'm like making fun of them.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I just have a character that is actually connecting with them, and he interacts with them, and kind of talks the lingo a little bit. So I did this after performing in prison for several years. Like I finally thought, okay, I think I can pull this off and do this with enough finesse that it will work. So it took some time for me to not only build the confidence, but also feel like that I know what I'm doing.
Right. And I think there's I've done a few prison shows as well, and I think there's an understanding, like they understand where they are. They, like it's all, like you can say it. There's no big secret, and like I had one thing where I made some sort of like or whatever, and somebody whistled, and I go, "Sir, that just proves to me you've been in here far too long." And like, it just got this huge laugh. But it's something that I was like, oh, after I said it, I was like, oh, should I have said that? But it got a huge laugh. But it's just because it's like we're all acknowledging the truth of
exactly right.
the scenario. So
you get it, you know it, and I'm sure for you, like, what was the first time, or when was the first time that you did that, and how did that go, and what was that like for you?
It was very weird. It was they were fairly recently, a few years ago, and it was just a very. I was like, oh, this is going to be, again, I don't know, it's not my crowd here that I know of, and I was like, are they going to like this stuff? Do they even have TV? Do they even know these cartoons? Do they even, all these things that run through your head, and then you go in and you just, they're there to have a good time and to laugh, and I think you see a lot of things on TV where it's just like they're human beings, and they're
exactly right.
And you treat them as such.
Yeah.
And I think that's the important thing is you just go in and you just, this is the truth, and you speak your truth and what you're trying to convey, and it went well. I mean, not every joke hit, but so from a comedian standpoint, you're like, oh, that joke didn't hit, or that joke didn't hit, and I'm like, well, but you step back and you go, it's not about what they gave to me, it's like what I can give to them.
That's right.
And do that. And so when you see the end product and they're all excited to be with you and take a picture and all that sort of stuff, you go, okay, then, yeah, that worked out well. It was a good show. So it was definitely very different, and it's something that I don't do a ton of, but I would like to do more and get a little more comfortable doing that, and just but they were definitely interesting shows.
Yeah. There's a Behind the Walls event that happens in Fresno every year, and so that's out your neck of the woods.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, California is a big state, so
yes.
So it's not exactly close to you, but it's a lot closer than Indiana,
mm-hmm.
which is where I am. So when that rolls around, I'm going to see if I can maybe make a connection there. It would be
I would love that.
Really fun to have you join us.
Yeah, I would love that. And it's Behind the Walls Prison Ministry. They can be found at www.behindthewalls.com. And one more time, what do they do?
Yeah, so it's an outreach to inmates, but really it's more of a training opportunity for people to have a cross-cultural experience in a very different environment. Because it's not just performers that they bring in. Actually, the performers are just a small part of it. It really is helping the team, what we call teammates, the volunteers who've come in, make a better connection. Because it's very awkward to walk into a prison and think that you can just walk up to somebody and strike up a conversation.
Right.
But if you sit down and watch a presentation together, well, now you can turn to hey, what'd you think of that? Wasn't that fun? Yeah, that was cool, wasn't it? And then the connection happens.
Yeah.
So
it's just a bridge to.
That's right. So there's something there for everybody to be involved with that. And specifically, they're wanting to bring the gospel to these inmates. And so
excellent. That's a wonderful ministry. So again, Behind the Walls Prison Ministry. www.behindthewalls.com. Definitely check that out. And wow, we are flying through this, David. I had so many questions I didn't even get to yet.
I know.
So we'll do a couple more, because usually we end with the charity aspect of it, the organization. But let's do a couple more questions, and then we'll get you out of here.
Okay.
If that's cool. So doing the developing the act of straight man, funny man. Did you watch a lot of comedy duos? Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello, that sort of stuff? Or Smothers Brothers?
Absolutely. And to see what works. And pretty much you do learn that, it's the formula that works is the straight man and funny man.
Yeah.
That just works. And although you had Burns and Allen, who genuinely were, both of them were very funny, but still it was more George Burns and how he was reacting to Gracie,
Right.
That really brought the comedy. Of course, Gracie just had her personality that was brilliant. So yeah, you just watch that interchange between those kinds of comedy duos. But then I watch other other ventriloquists, and you know what? Here's the thing. I still do what I would call standard ventriloquist routines that other ventriloquists have done over the years. Mostly I'm doing these bits that the guys who perhaps originated them are dead.
Right.
So I don't feel like I'm, stealing material per se as much as I'm covering.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying? Now that could be, I suppose that could sound a little bit like an excuse, but funny is just funny. And
right.
frankly, there's a whole generation of people who've never seen some of this stuff. Like, Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy had really great, funny material. And you can go on YouTube and look it up and find it. But, I can cover some of that material. And for some people, or for many, many people, they've never seen it before.
Right.
And it still works. It's that timeless.
I think that kind of ties in what, like we were saying about magicians. I was going to ask you, is that something, using some of the same material, is that necessarily frowned upon, or is it kind of like a, like you said, it's kind of an time honoring tradition where comedians will do the same routines from previous generations?
Yeah. It all depends on who you talk to.
Gotcha.
There are mostly comedians are the ones that have a real strong sense of, I don't want to be a hack.
Right.
And, stealing material, and I need to be, totally above board and all that. And I get that. Like, I'm not trying to make excuses for it. I understand that. But I suppose I'm also of the persuasion that, I don't mind doing street jokes in my act.
Right.
In other words, a joke that is it's a joke. It's a what we in the comedy world call a street joke is basically a joke that's been around that, people have told and retold, hundreds of times. But it's not so much the material at that point, right? It's how you do it.
Right.
How you cover it. And that's part of what makes it fun.
Well, and I think the one different thing that differentiates it for me anyway is, as a comedian, you don't have any other quote unquote skills. You know what I mean? As an entertainer, it's your jokes and your words. So that should be, you. Yeah. Whereas a ventriloquist or a magician, you have the skill, and you're not a comedian, you're a ventriloquist, which is a completely different skill set, like an entertainer. And there are people, I know some comics who will break out a guitar and do some more old vaudevillian style of jokes, and people go, oh, he's a hack. And a hack is just a term for like a thief, or, doing material that's been done forever. And it's like, well, he's not. I go, I don't consider him a comic. I consider him an entertainer. Like, to me, there's a difference to that, where it's like there's plenty of room for that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I would make that argument very strongly. But of course, if you're talking to comedy purists, they have a very narrow perspective of what they think is legitimate. And but a guy like Jeff Dunham, for example, and for those that don't know, Jeff is probably the most famous ventriloquist, perhaps now in history. Probably eclipsed even guys like Edgar Bergen, even back in the day. But Jeff is very much more, excuse me, more that stand-up comedy kind of emphasis. And he would probably argue, and that's why I went as far as I did. I don't, he would probably say, I don't think that I would be as successful, quote unquote, whatever that means. In other words, be as famous and have the opportunities that he's had if he had stuck with doing a more traditional ventriloquist act. And, he would tell you, I'm not doing a ventriloquist act. I'm doing comedy using ventriloquism.
Right.
And these are nuanced. It's all very nuanced. But it is true that there's a bit of a difference in presentation in how a stand-up comedian or, a comic would develop his act as compared to somebody who is more the entertainer. Like, I use musical elements in my show. There are elements in my show that are not designed to be laughs, what the stand-up comedian would say, I'm working to get maximum laughs per minute. No, I'm working on maximum smiles
right
per minute. And just general entertainment that, is engaging. So it's a little different standard.
Yeah. And it's just, it's all within your personality and what your goals are. And there's, like I always say, there's room for everybody. And, it's, I don't understand. I mean, I used to be that guy back in the day that was like, oh, it has to be this. And then, you mature and you grow up and you go, oh, no, it doesn't need to be that. And why can't you just let someone enjoy this? Why can't you, as long as you're not, doing something malicious with, by taking somebody's act, or if you took their puppet or their character or whatever, like then that's a little, different. But just doing, because all the premises have been done, in comedy, people go, oh, you can't talk about marriage, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about this. Okay, right. What is there left?
What's left? Yeah, exactly.
So it's finding your spin on it and just putting your essence and the characters that you have within it, and it's still just a skill that not a lot of people can do and do well. So so wow, this really just flew by. I've got so many other questions to get to. We'll have to have you come back on some other time, and we'll do some more.
Brian, I always enjoyed visiting with you, and I'm a huge fan. So
likewise, thank you so much. And again, you can check out David Pendleton. You can check him out at www.anythingcantalk.com. You can check him out on YouTube at youtube.com/anythingcantalk. Check out his the prison ministry, Behind the Walls prison ministry. I can't speak at behindthewalls.com. And I want to send a thank you to JD, our producer, for helping us out today. I want to thank David for taking his time. And you can check us out if you're interested. Again, Facebook, uncommoncomedy.com, Instagram at uncommoncomedytour, Uncommon Comedy Tour, and on YouTube, Uncommon Comedy Podcast. And again, David, thank you so much for taking some time today and spending it with us. And look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks so much, Brian. I appreciate it.
All righty. Thank you.